Before we begin the episode, I would like to thank our sponsor SB Sports, who provide high-quality sportswear and equipment across the UK and Ireland. You can view their product ranges at sbsports.co.uk or visit their social media at sbsportswearuk. No one does it like they do. Welcome back to the Sideline Live podcast. You can follow us over on Twitter and Instagram at the Sideline Live. We'd love to hear from you. On episode 30, I'm delighted to be joined by Irish international runner Amy O'Donoghue. On this episode, we delve deep into the psychological aspects of sport, injuries, and much more. Amy consistently shares some of the most valuable content on Instagram, and I had to get her on for a chat. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi Amy, thanks a million for coming on the podcast.
Thanks a million for having me. I'm looking forward to the chat now.
Before we get started, would you be able to give a bit of a 30-second intro to the listeners who might not know who you are?
Yes, so my name is Amy O'Donoghue. I am an Irish international runner. I run middle distance and I do 800, 1500 metres and cross country. I am a primary school teacher, but I'm currently training full-time. And I just moved up to Dublin in March to focus on my training. And yeah, that's what I'm up to now at the moment.
Brilliant. So you're originally from Limerick. You got involved in sport at a very young age. You got involved in individual sports at a young age. Can you talk us through a little bit of that?
Yeah, so when I was 5, I started Irish dancing, and I don't know if you've ever seen like Dance Moms and stuff, but I honestly think that that's how I have like a good mentality for sport, because like Irish dancing is a world of its own, and I would have competed at the highest level in it. So I suppose I that's what I did all throughout my childhood. I actually used to go to Irish dancing down in Cork, so my mum would collect me early 3 times a week from school, and I'd drive from Limerick to Cork and back home.
Wow.
So I suppose I was used to training at a high level from a very young age. So I think that definitely really helped for running.
And as you said there, you competed at the highest level. That obviously got you used to sort of dealing with pressure and individually dealing with pressure, because I'm someone in a team sport. I would really struggle if I was by myself, but maybe you had that experience from the dancing that played into the running a little bit.
Big time. Like when I look back now, like, you know, you're standing at the side of a stage about to put on a performance and you're like going through your steps in your head. Like most of the time your brain just goes blank before you go on stage. So there's a lot of pressure and nerves involved in Irish dancing. And even like we used to have, when I was down in Cork, we used to have maybe like a week of a workshop, and like you're in there like 5 hours a day when you're 8 and 9 giving it socks. And I think like you've blisters in your feet, it's really strenuous, but I mean I think it suits me massively. But I definitely got used to that like high pressure kind of zone from a young age.
Do you enjoy being a part, like just training individually and performing individually, or do you feel like you'd be better? Like I'm trying to think of like a team environment, you can rely on your teammates, whereas do you kind of like that control of, right, if I've put the work in here, I can perform?
I like training as in like really hard sessions. I do like doing them with other people. And I suppose it's not really, if you look at America, they have like these professional groups where there's huge teams and stuff. And I suppose I did have that experience when I was in college in America. But I think I do also quite enjoy training by myself the odd time. So like at the moment now, I would do like some runs by myself, but also I would do the harder sessions with people. And I think you do need that. I feel like for the hard sessions, you're able to dig deeper when you're running with people. But then for things like gym and your easy runs, like I like just kind of being by myself, like put on the music. And I always wonder, like, because I'm an only child, does it stem from that, like that I was just so used to my own company? But I do think a lot of runners are like that, where they do, well, more so middle distance and long distance, because a lot of our stuff you would probably do by yourself. But yeah, I do enjoy doing the easier stuff alone and then the harder stuff with people.
Okay, yeah. And how do you find then going to the relay? Because you've done a few events with that. What's it like then transitioning from, yes, it's still individual because you're running by yourself, but you're now part of a team?
I think it's actually a different kind of pressure. Like even all through my juvenile, I would have been on the sprint relay with my club Emeralds, and we would have been like arch rivals with Ferrybank, that club in Waterford, for the relay. So I think it's just a whole different ball game where, there is a lot of pressure on you, but it's a different kind of pressure and it's more relaxed. And I feel like even I really enjoyed now at the mixed relay at the European cross country. I really worked hard for it and I knew I was in really good shape. So I was quite confident going into it. But I think that when you're on a relay and everyone's in the same mindset, it's a great experience because everyone's like, okay, like, pushing each other on. And I do enjoy that. But I think I'm definitely more suited for an individual. Like, I could not picture myself like playing soccer. I remember in secondary school and like first year I would like throw tantrums and stuff. Like if I was in the wrong position, I couldn't even hit the ball. I was like, yeah, this is not for me.
I'll stick to the running. Yeah.
I'll stick to that, yeah.
Yeah. You have a funny story about getting into running. I think you showed up to some race in like basketball shorts and this thing where there's actual like, and you didn't know the laps or something. And when you were saying that before, I'm just thinking of the other people running the race that are probably taking this real seriously, and you come waltzing along having a notion what's going on.
Like I remember, it was first year, so like you're cool, all you care about in first year is like, I was there to look at the boys, like that's why I was there. See was there any boys I'd fancy, and I remember being on the start line, and I remember so specifically like watching the girls with the spikes, and I was like, what shoes are they like? Why don't I have them? I say my TNs. Like literally a quiff in my hair. I thought I was a bee's knees, like with the basketball shorts. Oh my god, I remember it so well. I actually do. It's so funny as well how things work out because like it was my PE teacher who was like, Amy, do the 800. I'm sure I hadn't a clue, but like it's so funny because I don't think if he had told me to do the sprints or the 400, I wouldn't have liked it because I know I'm not I would be fairly fast, but not like I wouldn't have just jumped into a 400 and won it. But because I had that engine, I think from Irish dancing, it's just gas how he picked that 800, and I was like, oh god, like this really suits me,
Yeah. Have you gone back to him since and been like, thanks for that?
Yeah, oh my god, it's crazy. Yeah, I have like even in all through secondary school, sir, he was still there. I was just like, this is mad, like that one decision has brought me a career in running.
That's it. Yeah, it just shows like, and you obviously had natural talent there because you just went in your first race and won. When did you really start to combine your hard work with that talent and kind of say, look, I have a shot at this and I really want to go for this?
I think probably 2010. Like I'm still like living in 2010. Like that was my best year in running, and I remember I was just super confident that year, and I was definitely like moving up, and I had kind of established myself. And I remember that's probably the year where I was like, you know what, like I want this, and I want to put in the hard work, and I was very focused. And that's I was 16 transition year, I think, because up to that it's kind of like you're more interested in having fun. And even in transition year, I suppose I still was definitely interested in having fun, but more so that's when I started veering to the like, okay, like this could go somewhere and I could go to America, and I want to do this properly.
And when did I'm trying to think of, so was that the time where you got a lot of success at underage? Because I know you had a couple of years of like brilliant like PB. I think you broke a record, a couple of things like that.
Yeah, so pretty much like I started in 2007 and it was pretty much just smooth sailing. I think I sprained my ankle once from Irish dancing because I was actually still dancing at the time, just more focused on running. And I think the dancing would have helped massively because it's just all plyometrics, and then 2010 was definitely, that was the year that I, broke the record and did the doublet Irish schools. I was fourth in the national seniors and ran a PB, which, I was only 16. So it was like, I suppose a big deal back then. I think things are very different now, but back then, it would have been a big deal for a 16-year-old. And then the following year is the year that it just kind of took a turn for the worse.
Yeah, I was reading online, you were doing a piece, I think it was advice to your 16-year-old self, and you spoke about how you thought you were invincible at that time of the success.
Mm-hmm. So basically, I would say it came quite naturally to me. So when I started running in 2007, I won the North Munster schools. I think I was maybe second or third in the Munster schools, but I was running these big PBs, and then I won my very first All-Ireland, and then I won pretty much every All-Ireland I ran in for the next few years. So wow. I I didn't know what it felt like to, I knew like if I was going into an All Ireland, it was to win. And then, once after 2010 and I got injured, that's when I definitely was like, okay, there's a whole other side to the sport that I haven't been exposed to, because up until then I was just going into races to win. And I had an odd bad day, but for the most part, I knew that I was the fastest going into the race, or I was the favorite. So I did feel invincible, but I was humbled very quickly the following year.
Yeah, how did the first injury start out? What happened? I think was it a long-term injury?
So it was 2011, and I had actually, the All Ireland cross country had been postponed because of weather. So the year started off insane. I won the All Ireland cross country, and I wouldn't have been favoured to win it. I won it by 10 seconds. I was absolutely delighted, and then indoors I think went really well as well. But that was the year that EYOF, the European Youth Olympic Games, were on in Turkey. And I think it was like maybe March or April, I started getting this pain in my foot. And I remember like marking down in my training diary every time it would hurt. And there was like 40 marks coming up to the summer season where I was in pain.
Oh
And
my God.
I kept it quiet for a while, and I was like, something's not right here. And then I was obviously training super hard to make the European Youth Olympics. And I mean, I got on that. I just about got the standard. I scraped the standard. And looking back now, like I shouldn't have gone, but I played it down to everyone, because when you're 17, all you see is what's in front of you. And I actually collapsed over the line between the pain and the heat stroke. It was on in Turkey, so it was roasting.
God,
and I remember in the heat, I hobbled across the line. Like, they had to take me into like a room and like put like a load of cold water on me. And I think it was just a mix of everything where I was like, I can't do this. And so that was the summer of 2011, and I found out that I had a stress reaction in my navicular. But like, the surgeon that I went to said that if I had left it go another 2 weeks, I might never have run again. That it was that bad what was going on in there.
Oh
So this was a recurring thing then, 2011, 2012, 2013. And I eventually got surgery in summer of 2013. So it was very rough 2 or 3 years around that time.
The training for the European Youth Olympics in Turkey, that obviously made your foot worse.
Yeah, and like I remember one particular session, and it was a really tough session, but like I knew mentally, I was like, my foot is just banjaxed. And I remember after it, like just bursting out crying, because like I knew that like I couldn't run to my best, but like I also was like, I'm getting on that plane. Like I am getting on that plane. But it was really frustrating. It was my first experience of like one of those kind of bone injuries. But what actually was happening was I had a bone spur, and that's what kept making this navicular injury reoccur. So that's I had to get keyhole surgery then and get that bone shaved down, and it stopped then. But that was missed for years. That the spur, and that's why it kept happening. Yeah,
very frustrating, I'd say, as well.
Yeah, it was frustrating because I wasn't used to it, and I wasn't where I wanted to be. I wanted to go to America. I couldn't find the same form from 2010, and then it was 2012, and the next thing it was 2014. And I remember like my mom at a race heard someone say, this is in maybe universities, and I had come like second or third, and someone said, oh yeah, like that Damien Donahue, she used to be good. And I was like, oh my God, like, just some things like that. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, God, that's awful. As well as for your mom to hear, and she's been there, like probably watching you, like breaking down, crying all the time.
Exactly.
That's shocking. And in between that time, was 2011 to 2013, before the surgery, were you then like on and off running? Like, were you allowed to run with your foot?
I was on and off. So basically what would happen is I'd get back running, and then it would come again, and then I'd have to go back into the boot again. So it was just this vicious cycle. The one good thing though is I was doing my leaving cert, so I was distracted, and I was going in. I remember I was delighted because in Limerick we have skirts down to our feet, the really long skirts.
Yeah.
But like, I just love wearing like comfy clothes, so I got to wear literally a tracksuit pants in school every
Oh,
day because I was in
brilliant.
the booth. So I was
Yeah.
delighted. Like, but yeah, that's pretty how my fifth and sixth year went, was in and out of a booth.
God, that's
So
frustrating. But as you said, take the advantage where it is and get to wear the tracks
yeah,
bottoms. Like,
yeah,
yeah. And
exactly.
then talk us through the leaving cert. So you were thinking of going to the States from your form in 2010. How does that process work? How do you contact schools? Do they contact you? Talk us through that a little bit.
So I was lucky because I would have been like high profile, we'll say, at the time that I was approached by colleges. I know it kind of goes both ways. Like, you can email them, but I was also approached. But my cousin Frank O'Mara went to Arkansas. He also went to the Olympics and was a former world indoor champion, double world
Oh
indoor
wow.
champion. So yeah, so he went to Arkansas. So that's where the connection was there, and I knew that like Arkansas was one of the best, like, So
Mm.
I visited Arkansas and Auburn then in fifth year. I'm sure I was just like, it's just the coolest thing ever, like, it was, oh my
Yeah, like
God,
the
it was
movies.
just mad. Yeah, it was literally the exact same as the movies. And then I went with Arkansas. So I kind of knew in sixth year like that I was going to Arkansas, but I still studied, I still wanted to have a good leaving cert. And like, it's so funny because I remember my mom was like, let's defer, because I wanted to do teaching. And when I got the place in Mary I, she was like, let's defer it for a year. And I was like, why would I need to do that? Like, I'm going to be in America,
Yeah,
living the dream. And like, thank God she made me do it, because I ended up coming home. So I was so
yeah,
lucky that she made me do it.
yeah. It just shows you kind of need a backup plan, because not like when you're 17, 18, you don't think you're going to be like, yeah, State's going to go great. I'm going to have my 4 years, got to run amazing. Whereas your mom kind of being like, just in case, like, and sure, if you didn't need it, you
Just
didn't
in
need it in the
case.
end.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. Like, when you're that young, sure, you don't care. Like, you don't think
Yeah,
of the future. So it was great. It's so great. Like, that she made me do that.
yeah. And when did you? So the leaving cert was in June time. When did you go to the States? Was it early enough, or was it kind of September time?
Yeah, I remember like I missed my debs and all that. Like, I was so
Oh
gutted.
no.
Yeah. So the leaving cert was in June, and even I remember I raced once or twice, but I was way off my times, and I was like, oh, like, trying to get back into shape and stuff before I headed
Yeah.
over. So then, because Frank O'Mara, he lives in Arkansas still,
Mhm.
in a place called Little Rock, which is about 3 hours from the college. So we went over there first, and that was actually nice. And even like, they were so good to me for like the breaks and stuff. I would just go down to see my cousins and Frank and Patty in Little Rock, and they were always so good to me and helped me a lot. And yeah, that's when I went in August, and it was definitely a big shock to the system, because
Mhm.
I was used to being a big fish in a small pond,
Yeah.
and now I'm in one of the top schools in America, and I'm training alongside Olympians, and I'm one of the slowest on the team. So it's hard to adjust to that when you're so used to being one of the top runners. So yeah, that's when I went over anyway.
And what was the training style a bit different over there? I heard Nadia Perez speak about it before in her time in the States. She was saying the coaching is a bit different. She was saying they're doing a lot of long runs. Was that similar to your experience?
Yeah, like, one thing that I really struggled with was like, for warm ups, for sessions, I would like crawl, like, I'm just shuffling my feet. And over there, it was almost like it was getting faster. It was like a tempo run. So like, I was finishing the warm ups and I was ready for bed. And I
Right.
suppose it was just a lot more volume, and
Okay.
it was more like, looking back now, it's kind of training like I'd be doing now at 27.
Yeah.
The wasn't used as volume back then, so it just, I was way too quick for me to jump into that training.
Yeah. In America, it kind of seems like if you're not out training, you're not improving. And if people don't see you out training, then why are you on scholarship? Why are you there? Am I right in thinking that? Is that similar to the running?
It's definitely hardcore, and it's like a lot more cutthroat, because I suppose in Ireland, you become friends with your competitors and like, yeah, you're rivals on the track, but like outside of that, like I'm friends with like most of the girls I race nearly, like we're good friends, you know? And like we chat away and like, yeah, when you're on the line, it's a different ball game. But like outside of that, we chat about everything and boys, anything like you can think of, like, you know, like we chat about it. Whereas I just feel like when you're on a team in America, it's a lot more like there's girls there that want your scholarship. You know, they want you're on a scholarship and they want that. And it can get bitchy, you know, a big group of girls like that can definitely get bitchy.
Yeah.
But I mean, I honestly learned so much, and I wish I could go now at this age
Okay.
because I
Yeah.
feel like I would be so ready to just jump into it now. But I think
Okay.
18-year-old me was not ready.
Yeah, naturally, like it's a completely different country. What was it like, sort of off the track then, with the college, with lectures or classes, I think they call it, with the parties? Like I'm sure there was a couple of parties on. What's that American lifestyle like in college?
It's it's mad, and like I suppose I would probably go back to America and go somewhere else, but like down south, I just found that like it was very much like cowboys and country and western, and I just had it. As Irish people, like we have a very different personality to them, and like so I did make some amazing friends, and like it's just looking back, I'm like, did that actually happen? Like, was I actually there for a year? Like, you had the frat parties, you know, the sororities, and like even watching that, like they have this thing called Rush Week where they do all these chants trying to like get into all the houses, and like I'm just like, what? Like, I just can't even imagine that in Ireland.
Yeah,
It was so cool, and it's honest to God, it's the exact same as what I see in the movies. It
really.
really is. It's the
Okay.
exact same. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, it was such a cool experience, but I think obviously because of the way I was running, because I do find that like I find that when running is going well, you know, everything's great in life,
Yeah.
whereas when it isn't, every little thing seems like just a nightmare, you know.
Off. Yeah, exactly. Do you think, because you were going through the injury at the time, if the
Mhm.
injury wasn't a thing and you're running well, do you think you would have stayed, or was there other factors that you came home?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was homesick, but I think like a big part of it was I wasn't running well, and I was like, well, I'm here to run well, and that's just it wasn't clicking. And you know, I remember at Christmas I was struggling, and I came home, and you know, I was like, you know, I'll give it. I remember like I'd be like, my dad was like, oh no, like come home, and my mom was like, no, Amy, you know, you have to try it, and I was like, okay. So like I remember going back after Christmas, and I was like, bye, like as I was going through the airport, and then I turned the corner, and I just like burst out crying,
Oh
and I was
no.
like, oh yeah, and then I was like, maybe I'm just not supposed to be here if I'm crying like going back. And then I was actually, funnily enough, I was getting into really good shape in January, the fittest I'd ever been actually. And so then didn't I get the injuries back into this?
Yeah,
So I
typical.
think
Yeah.
that tipped me over the edge. Then I was like, right, I just need to. And as well, see, the thing is, like in those big schools, like there could be four other people injured, so they all need a lot of attention as well.
Yeah.
Whereas I just was like, you know what, I think this has been going on for too long, this injury, and I'm just not ever going to even get back to where I was. I think I need to be at home, and just like if I need to go to the physio on a certain day, like I need to go, and that's that. And
Mm.
I think looking back, it was definitely the right decision, because I think I probably would have gone back and forth with that injury for another few years, because it was in
Okay.
Ireland that the bone spur was spotted, not in America. So I think
Okay.
it would have probably gone on for another while.
And during that time in America, like you were very young, going by yourself. I know you had family now that were still 3 hours away. In Ireland, you'd be
Mm.
at the other side of the country. Like, what
Yeah.
did you learn? What did you learn about yourself? Because I was saying to you, I'm going through injury. I feel like I've learned so much about myself. And with your time in America, you know, you really find out a lot about yourself during really
Mm.
challenging times. How did you find those experiences?
Well, I had, as well as the injury, I actually struggled with my weight over there. So I
Okay.
put on weight. I put on about a stone, which, like, yeah, to the non-sporting world might be a big deal, but it was a really big deal for running.
Okay.
And I struggled massively to get that off. So, I mean, I learned so much about like discipline, and I suppose because I'd never been out of home, or like not lived with my parents or whatever, that like, there's a big bad world out there. Like if you want something, you have to be disciplined enough to do all the things to get it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I was used to, my food being put out for me, everything when you're a kid in school, like, you get your dinners and stuff and your parents do everything to help you. And this was just the opposite. I was like not, getting any help barely. So I
Yeah.
definitely just learned like just I suppose I learned as well how competitive running can be and how disciplined and dedicated you did need to be to get to the top, and how like injuries are just a part of it. Whereas I suppose I kind of thought that I would shake this off, but I was
Mm-hmm.
like, this is actually going to be a part of your running career, and you have to learn how to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Was it more as well that you learned sport is fragile? You're not invincible like you were maybe in 2010. It's not like you're going to breeze through this. It's going to be like this isn't. There's no guarantee here.
Definitely, like I really thought that I would go to America. I would just like slot in, run PB after PB after PB, and then like marry the quarterback in the football team and just I swear to God, like I that's what I thought I would happen.
Yeah.
Maybe you could like dip my toe into a bit of cheerleading and like honest to God. And it couldn't have gone more opposite to that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it
Yeah.
definitely was like, you need to cop on here and realize that like there's gonna be some rough periods, and you're gonna have to work really hard to even get back to where you were, and not to mind to push on another level.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And was the injury, you mentioned it before, I want to talk about it a bit. You keep a training diary, but you seem to have kept it from a very young age. Was that more to do with trying to maintain your load with the dancing and the running, or was it from the injury, or how did that kind of come about?
I think like my coach is also my cousin. So my coach Anna Mara would be Frank O'Mara's sister.
Okay.
So we're really close, and she's in Limerick as well. And she always just said, make sure and keep a training diary. So I actually just really liked looking back over the sessions. Like some days I'll sit down and I'll take out my training diary from literally 2011 and go back through it. I just find it really nice to track my progress and be like, oh, that was a really good session. And even looking back now with the whole thing with injury, I think it really helps to track an injury and also to see the few weeks before you get injured, like, okay, what did I do here that
Hmm.
might have caused this injury?
Yeah, as we were saying before we recorded, with running, you're trying to reach your limit without going over the limit. So the training diary seems to be like a great way to keep on top of that.
That's the thing. And there is such a fine line in sport between, pushing the boundaries and then tipping over that boundary. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to learn that the hard way. But at least then, if you have the training diary, you can be like, okay, this is maybe where this happened, or going forward, this is what we need to avoid.
Did you find that it kind of played into building confidence a little bit, that you could kind of look back and see, like you said, 2011, or I think it was when you were writing down 40 times that your foot was killing you, where then in 2014 you started to kind of get back on track and you're kind of looking, geez, I couldn't run this time 2 years ago, but now I'm really close to a PB.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that like one massive thing I've learned from running is how to build back up that confidence, because as I was a really confident runner in 2010, and then I would say from 2011 to 2018, I would say I was not a confident runner, and I was my own worst enemy. I was doubting myself and really not believing in myself, and it was
Hmm.
probably 2016 that I probably became aware of that and was like, hang on, like, why am I going into races like not backing myself? And then I suppose that's when I started working on it. And then I had a significant jump, I suppose, in 2018, where I was like, okay, like now I think I'm finally getting back to where I am. But like all the in betweens were tough. Like, but I think like one thing that I have noticed is that it's a work in progress. Like it never stops. The whole building your confidence and
Hmm.
training your mind, like exercising your mind, and like it makes so much sense when you think about how much we train physically, and then we never really think like, hang on, this also needs to be trained. Like your brain needs to be trained. Um, and yeah, it's a work in progress, but I think it's a great thing to start doing.
Definitely. You spoke about it before. I think someone gave you advice. It was the easiest hard work is the physical. As you said, we sometimes forget to train our mind. What were the methods you kind of used to build up your confidence during that period of time?
So I remember like one thing I did, and it was like I literally remember doing it every single day. Is when I would when something negative would come up, like, oh, like this race could go shit. I would be like, okay, like you now have to replace that with three positive things. Like your training has been going really well. You won the last race you did, and there is no evidence to show that this will go shit. So, and it could be great. And like the more I started doing that, the more and more I like quietened the negative thoughts. It's mad, like, but it's such hard work. And I think a big thing with people is that like when they listen to me, they think that like this all came really natural to me. That like one day I woke up and was like, I'm just gonna not think negatively anymore. And like that could
Yeah.
not be further from the truth. Like it was. I remember like when I started getting into it, it almost became an obsession where I just wanted to learn all about this. And like I was like, hang on, like this is mad that we can just shut that voice off or at least quieten it down. So I started watching YouTube videos and reading books, and then I would see like a tiny improvement in a race, and then I was like, oh my god, like it's working. And then I would just build and build and build.
Yeah, I laugh because I probably was the same before in saying, oh, she's just positive, or like she just had that all the time. You're only making an excuse for yourself. You're like, there's no way I can do that. Like,
Yeah,
I can't be that positive. And because I'm the same as you, like, I have this negative voice in my head, and trying to get out of that, it's hard. Like, and
it's
everyone's like,
really hard.
just think positive. But it's not that easy. Like, and people just try to
Yeah.
play it off. But as you said, like, it's not. It's hard work. Like,
Mm-hmm. It's hard work, but it is constant hard work. Like
yeah,
I would say since 2018, every single day of my life, I've done something in some way or like practiced something in some way, and like that's a
wow,
long time. Like that's 3 years. So like, and it's funny as well because I obviously would have like reached periods of like stagnation and being like, why am I doing this? It's not working. I'm not thinking any different. This is so stupid. Like, and I would be the same watching other people being like, do you know what now? They're just like, they were born that way. They are just talking pure and utter tripe. And like, I don't believe it. And then it's gas. Like one day, then you look back on the progress you've made and you're like, whoa, like, things have changed. And like, even now, I'm like, when I hear people be like, I'm stuck inside my head and like, I'm negative, I'm like, oh my God, like that was me. And now I suppose as well, it's like developing just a better relationship with yourself.
yeah.
I was like, that was me. And now I've really like mastered that, I think. And it's still a work in progress, but I definitely can catch that negative voice instantly and be like, oi, like don't even think about it, not
Yeah.
today. It's mad, but again, it's just that practice, and it's just training the negative voice to quieten down and the positive one to be a lot louder.
What's your self talk like then when you're running? Like when you're running a race, and kind of like, I've never ran a race before, so I don't know what it's like. What's the thought process like? What are the voices like in your head? Do you find that sometimes it's a negative one that you have to kind of just think positively, or how do you kind of keep keep it going in your head when you're running?
So like I think, before I was injured and stuff, it would have been really, really positive. Then when I got injured and I was trying to come back, it was really, really negative, and I was really hard on myself. And I suppose I then noticed, I was like, okay, if your best friend was racing now, right now, you would be like, come on, let's do this, let's go. Like you have this, you've got this, you've got this. Yet when you're racing the exact same thing, you are like, this is shit, like you're shit. And I was like, that is not making any sense. And then what I started to do then was like talk to myself in a race, like how I would talk to one of the girls that was racing, like, you got this, like, let's just dig in for this 100 meters, like, let's catch this girl, like, you're doing great, you're doing amazing. And like, that is a bit uncomfortable to start off with because we just don't talk to ourselves like that, like,
Yeah,
especially in Ireland, I feel like it's like, oh my God, you can't like praise yourself or
yeah,
anything.
definitely.
So it was definitely like practicing talking to myself like I would talk to if I was watching someone really close to me racing. And that's how it is now. Like, don't get me wrong, though, there's still the days when I have a shit race and that voice is just like, it's just gone. But the thing is that now that happens, very few and far in between. And
Yeah.
when it does happen, I'm just like, okay, that's life. It happens once in a while. Like, let's move on, you know?
Mm-hmm. And interesting, like you were saying, catch the girl ahead. In a race then, do you set yourself little goals throughout the race, or you just focus on the finish line? How does that work?
Yeah, so definitely I try, like when the race is starting, I try not to focus on the outcome because I just think that's
Mm-hmm.
overthinking. So I kind of break it down into laps. So I'm like, okay, for the first lap, let's just get into a good position and try and hold that position. I think for middle distance running, it's always the third part of the race that a lot of people struggle with. Like that's definitely where my weakness is, where I kind of switch off or I relax into it a bit too much. Whereas really it's where you need to be actually dialing in like as much as you can and focusing in as much as you can. So I think normally for the third lap I've started like, you know, having cues like, okay, like let's focus on your form here. Let's focus on your hands. Let's dig deep here. Like let's practice your stride here. So yeah, there would be little cues. And even if I'm training and have a hard session, like what I do sometimes is like affirmations and stuff. So like I'm strong, I'm powerful, I'm brave, I'm fearless, and like they really do help, like because they completely take your, especially when the pain starts to come in. Like when you
Mm-hmm.
start saying that, it's like you kind of relax a bit. So
Yeah.
I find that those kind of affirmations and stuff really, really do help. It's just really about like constantly reaffirming that positive talk. And like if the negative talk comes up, just being like, no, I'm strong, I have this, I have this. And then eventually that positive talk starts to overpower the negative.
Brilliant. That affirmations thing sounds really interesting. Where did you learn that? Have you worked with a sports psychologist, or is that just through your own learning and research that you've tried things out and they've just kind of clicked for you?
Yeah, I have worked with a sports psychologist, Liam Morgan, and he's the one who said to me the easiest hard work was physical.
Yeah.
And I think he just opened a whole window of like self awareness for me. But the affirmations, like I definitely found on YouTube and Instagram and stuff. Like I'd follow a lot of pages that have affirmations, and just from doing my own research and realizing that okay, a lot of runners do this and have to really talk. Especially, I feel like the Americans like really drill that in, and like I suppose they'd be quite big on social media and they really put a lot of time and effort into it, so you can kind of get a really good insight into how they train and stuff. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it was just from YouTube and stuff that I started learning about all the affirmations and actually the importance of implementing them into training then.
Okay. And I know you're a big advocate for visualization, and you spoke about it before. Do you visualize just the positives? Do you visualize the negatives? How does that work?
So for last year's national seniors, like I had been injured before that, like coming into it, and I definitely I don't like to visualize the negative, but I visualize like, okay, well look, there could be a fall. You have to account for that. There could be, it mightn't pan out the way you would like.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really focus on them. I focus on how I'd like the outcome to be, but I do like account for them and leave a bit of space for them.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, no, I don't want to focus on them. But like last year before the indoors, I literally visualized I'm not ashamed to say this, like I visualized how the interview would go after the race with RC. Like I went into that
Wow.
much detail. Yeah, like I was like, I'm winning this race, and I visualized like from the moment I got up to going there to warming up to meeting all the girls I'd be racing, to going to the sofa, like even going to the toilet before the call room, going to the call room, winning the race, like crossing the line, and practicing my interview. And I mean, it's so funny because then when it happened, I was like, oh my god, now it's actually happening. Oh, shit.
Yeah.
But like
That's
it was almost,
mad.
yeah, but it was almost familiar to me because I had I had done it so many times in my head, and even like winning that race, I was just like, now it was an amazing race for me. I just felt brilliant, but even like I remember there was a point I was quite boxed in, and I hadn't, like, you know, obviously accounted for that really, and I was like, I could have panicked. Like there was a point where I could have panicked and been like, oh, this is actually going so well, or like, okay, you're boxed in here, that's it now, that's it, you're
Yeah.
done. you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't panic. And even I remember with kind of a lap to go, I still felt really, really good. And then as we came around the last kind of, or the second last corner, I really wanted to make a move. And I was like, just don't, like, just, I had pictured like I'd go with about 200 to go and just give it socks. So I just had to like hold back. And then when I went, I went, but I had practiced it so much in my head that it just felt really natural. Whereas I
Yeah.
think if I hadn't visualized any of that, it would have just been chaos and it would have been panic.
Yeah.
So I find visualization just brilliant. But like, sometimes when people think of visualization, they might just think of like, oh yeah, just kind of picturing one or two things. Like you need to go into detail, like as in so much so, like even what I was saying about that interview, like that's what I envisioned happening, and it did. And I think, like, when you talk about manifestation and stuff, like that's how I literally manifested that, like, because I got through it so much in my head, like it's.
And for the listeners that don't really understand or get visualization, because sometimes this is really new to people, how do you visualize the race? So when you're thinking of, like, we'll talk about that race in particular, when you're going through all of the steps in your head, like you were talking in detail there about even going to the toilet before the call and the interview, is this just when do you do this? How do you do it? Just talk us through a little bit of that.
So I suppose for me, because I spend a lot of time by myself out running, that's when I do it a lot. I think before you go to bed, do it as well, and in the morning. But the two times that I mostly do it are before I go to bed and when I'm out training. And I think, like, just it's kind of like daydreaming in the sense of like picture exactly the best possible outcome and how you'd like it to happen, and just go over and over and over that in your head, and like even picturing like how it would feel and how you'd react if it happened and stuff, like it's definitely the details, I think, that count. And like even I would kind of go through like what I would be saying to myself in at certain points of the race. It's not just like picturing it as if you were watching it. It's like really putting yourself into that moment and imagining exactly how you'd like for it to play out.
Okay, so we've spoken a lot about the mental side. Could you put a percentage on it and compare in running, like how much is it physical and how much is it mental?
Oh, honestly, this has changed a lot over the years. So like I think you of course have to put in the physical work, but I would go so far as to say it's like 80% mental. I really, really do. I think two people can stand on the starting line. One could be in the shape of their life, and the other one might be in good shape, but not the shape of their life. And if the person that's in good shape is stronger mentally, they'll win, because racing is completely different to just being out training. And I think there's so much emotion, there's so much nerves, and there's a lot on the line, and there's so much pressure that I think it's really, really easy to lose the head. And it's telling in a race if someone doesn't have the mental work, because you can actually see them kind of crumble under the pressure. So I think that like running is definitely 80% mental. I think of course you have to do the physical work, but I think people maybe underestimate how much mental work is involved.
And speaking of pressure and nerves, how do you deal with pressure when you're, as you said, the Irish title is on the line? You're probably like really nervous. How do you deal with that? Do you actually get nervous before races?
Oh my God, I get quite nervous. Yeah, like, and I think it's funny because it never changes. Like, I still get as nervous now as I did when I was 14. But I think back then I wouldn't have like talked to myself about it. But now I'm like, Amy, like, you're nervous because you care. Like, that's a good thing. You're literally, if you weren't nervous, it would be weird. Like, you're nervous because you really care about this and you put in a lot of work and effort. And yeah, I definitely, like, when I do get those like kind of pangs of like nervousness, I'm like, okay, like, remember all the hard work you've done. And also, it's just a race. There's going to be so many more. That's the thing. I really try and kind of like play it down. And I'm like, Amy, this is just a race. You've done so many of them. You're going to do so many more. Like just chill out, and like I'll, read a book or listen to music or like go on TikTok or something, like take my mind off it
Yeah.
completely. But I think I definitely kind of changed my perspective on nerves, and where I used to perceive them as a bad thing. Now I'm like, this is good. This is going to get you pumped up. Like, this is what you want. You want to be nervous. You know, you're nervous because you care.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I've heard a couple of athletes speak about that and kind of flip it on his head. I know you're a big fan of Lauren Johnson on Instagram. She's brilliant. I love her stuff, but she's always like, flip it on the head. You know, if you're nervous, brilliant, great, welcome them. You know, don't be so nerves go away. You know.
And one thing I really like about what she says is, you know, talking about like focusing on the good, and like, as humans, for some reason, we just love to talk about the shit things that are going on. Like, we love it. Like, and I'm just as bad. And we never address, like, hang on a minute though. Like, there's so many good things going on. And I think that's such a big thing, is like to focus, you know, before races, training, just focus on the good things. Like, do you know what? I'm out here, I'm fit, I'm healthy, I can run, and I actually get opportunity to do this. And like, even changing that vocab from like, oh, I have to do this, to I get to do this is a change. That's one, and that actually really helped me a lot. Like, is, you know, I'd be sitting in the car, it'd be lashing rain, and I'm like, oh god, I have to go now and do a run. And then I'm like, nope, Amy, you get to do this. And there's people that are injured and can't run, can't even walk, that would probably love to be doing this. And then it's like, okay, stop, just go run now.
Do you think without that injury, would you have the same perspective and appreciation for running?
No way. I think, like, I would obviously have a great appreciation for it, but I think there's just something that like makes you really hungry to come back and fight after you've been knocked down. And I think that it's a true showing of your character when you've had a good few setbacks and you're stubborn enough to be like, no, that is not me done. Like, I want more from the sport. And you learn a lot of lessons. You know, I definitely think that you don't really learn much from winning national titles. They just kind of like solidify, I'm in great shape and this is where I should be. But when you're, you know, about to be injured, or you had this plan for the season, and all of a sudden you realize, you know, shit, like, it's not going to go the way I want it to go, and you have to readjust your plans, your training, and little niggles are popping up. Like, that's when you learn about yourself, like how your character is and how you can actually deal with these challenges. And I think that they're the times, when I look back now in sport, those are the times I actually weirdly appreciate. I mean, I could have done without a good few of the injuries.
Yeah.
They're the times that you really grow, you know?
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned before kind of about bouncing back after a poor race. Talk us through that, because I'm really interested to hear how you developed it and how you kind of go through that process.
Yeah, I definitely think that, like, when I was younger, I used to be so, like, I mean, I do tend to be dramatic, but like, I would be so dramatic after races. I remember after university cross country one year, I literally finished the race and I was like, I'm giving up running. Like, it's so, just because it went bad, and I was just like through tantrum, and I was like, no, like, I'm training so hard and I'm just not getting the results anymore, and I'm giving up. And I took 2 weeks off, and then I was ready to come back, you know. Like, I was like, okay, I'm back now. But I think as I got older and older and realized, okay, you know what, like, there's going to be a lot of bad days here. You actually can't dwell on it. And even now, I'm just like, you don't have time to dwell on these. And also, what are you gaining from dwelling on it? Nothing. You're not gaining anything. And I almost like, now, when I was younger, I used to not do this, and that's why I used to dwell on it. But now I treat the bad days as like a learning experience. And I'm like, okay, what was the build up to this race, and like, what happened? Like, is there a reason for it? Like, you know, could it have been to do with like my headspace? Was I in the right headspace? Was there external things going on? Was it my period? Was it something like that? And there's always just something to learn now, I think, from a bad race and a bad performance. So instead of being like, that was shit, I'm like, okay, yeah, fair enough, it was shit, but like, let's see how we can avoid that from happening again.
You spoke about it before, like, that's such a positive outlook from kind of what we were saying when you were younger. Maybe you didn't have that. You said before, when you begin to approach life from a place of gratitude, wonderful things will happen. When did you start to think like that, and what were those wonderful things that you really started to notice?
It's actually so funny. It was actually a relationship that is how I got into that mindset. So it was a guy I was going out with in 2018, and it was just a really nice, happy, healthy relationship. And I was like, God, like, and I remember that actually, that's when I got like my first gig with Lifestyle and Nike. And there was just a lot of good things happening. And I feel like maybe before I would have just been like, oh yeah, whatever. Whereas that year in 2018, I had started being like, that's me. I'm actually like so happy and I'm so grateful that all these things are happening. I suppose like just because I was happy out in the relationship, it probably opened my mind to being more grateful for everything. So that's
Yeah.
definitely when I became like way more into gratitude and actually being like super thankful for what I have. And honestly, like it's made the world of difference. It really, really has. And I think you can choose to live by that, or else you can just not. And I'm just like, how can you not when there's so many things going on and that are we have so much to be thankful for, like.
Yeah. Do you keep like a, not a gratitude journal, but would you kind of keep like on top of and just remind yourself, like the way I do my to-do list in the morning, it's kind of like focus for the day, a highlight for the day, and then something that I'm grateful for. Is that something similar that you would do?
Yeah, I wouldn't do it every day, but I think when I'm like doing the gratitude stuff, I'm like, I will write it down and be like, let's look back in the last year, or like this has happened. Like these are such cool things, and sometimes though even it's the small things. It's just like, okay, I have a house, I have a roof over my head. I mean, a house to go to, and I think that like I would just notice even after writing down stuff like that, that you're like your headspace has just changed completely, and it's
Mm-hmm.
it's so much lighter and better. And I actually find as well that like when you're going through a shitty time, that's when you're like, okay, like yeah, this is a bit shit, but let's actually think about all the great things. And then it's really, really helpful to kind of list out the things you're grateful for when you are going through that negative headspace. I feel like it almost instantly fixes it, like.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny. The different times that that list means so much more. And as you said, like the positive and negatives. Speaking of social media, you've quite a following at the moment. Talk us through that, because sort of like the influencer culture.
Mhm.
When did you start to really, when did you start to notice your social media sort of gaining attention?
So it was actually COVID. I would have like had maybe 10K followers, I guess. So I suppose I did have like a following before I started talking about anything, that I do talk about on my page now. And then once COVID hit I suppose I would have shared like the odd quote or like something that I would have found helped people. Um, and then I started talking. I never ever thought about like the talking and stuff. I was never like, oh, I would like to do that. Like I would do it joking with my friends, like, oh, that, like bloggers,
Yeah.
but like I never would have been like, oh, I could see myself doing that. And then when all the first lockdowns started happening and the takeovers started happening, I remember I did my first takeover was with her sport, and then I did one pretty soon after with Athletics Ireland, and like the traction I was getting was just insane. And I was like, whoa, like people are actually, first of all, really interested in this, and second of all, like they care about what I have to say. And I was like, I actually have a voice here now and I can speak from my experience. And then I was like, I actually really enjoy like sharing my experience. And I suppose it definitely helped people to hear like that, I did have injuries and I got through them and came out the other side. And I suppose I had, as I was saying, that I had like started to approach life from a more grateful place in 2018. So this was 2020. So I had learned so much. I had done my research, and I was like, I can share this with people, and people actually really enjoyed learning about it. So that's kind of how it all started off.
And at the beginning, were you really nervous to be sharing and even just videoing yourself? Because I don't think I've ever put up a video of me talking on Instagram. Like,
I definitely was like nervous to video myself, but I I suppose it all happened so quickly that like one day I was doing a takeover on a page, and then the next day I was just chatting away on my camera talking about like emotional maturity and stuff. Like I really just like dived into it. Like
yeah,
but I think from like the age of 21, I just stopped caring about what people thought.
okay.
It was just like a light bulb moment, and I think that helped massively. Is I do not care what people think. So I think if I did, I would have been a lot more reluctant to start talking on my Instagram. But the fact that like I do not care at all what people think, it definitely helped me to get into it quite quickly.
And was that something that when you were younger, were you really like, did you really care what other people think? Or, and I'm interested here, it was just like kind of like a light bulb, like, because that's something I'm working on constantly,
Mhm.
is I trying to not care what people think. It's a lot easier said than done now, but I'm interested here, it was just like a light bulb.
It was in college, and I think there was a little thing went on social media where like there was like I was slated, and it was then I was just like all these people. I remember like all like when people were like saying stuff online, and then um in person were like my BFF, and I was like, this is what life is like. Like people will say whatever they want on social media, but they will never ever say it to your face. And it just made me realize like, okay, like people are so preoccupied. It was definitely like a massive realization I had, and I just realized like people are so preoccupied like with their own life. And then I also thought about myself. I was like, I don't care what other people are doing. Like I'm watching like someone's story, I'll watch the story, I'll be like, oh yeah, that was interesting, and then I won't ever think about it again. Whereas like
Yeah.
you as yourself think they are going to think about this forever. And I think this is going to come into that realization as well, is that like people don't care. People are so
Yeah.
preoccupied with their own lives, their own troubles, their own worries, that like they might care for a split second, but after
Yeah.
that it's gone. And I also was like, I thought it was more important that like if I could help one person, that's more important than people being like, "Whoa, what does she think she's doing?" I suppose, and like I would get nice messages from people being like, "Thank you so much, like that really helped." And I was like, no, that the feeling of that like makes me so happy, and it overpowers caring what people think.
Speaking of kind of other people, do you get much hate on social media? Is that something that you've come across a lot?
I've had one or two things, but I have to say I have been so lucky. And to be honest, I think that that's because, what I talk about is my own experience and running as such. So I'm not an easy target, as in like maybe the more normal bloggers doing this and that would kind of be more easier targets. But I feel like with what I'm doing, and like I'm genuinely like out here like, oh, this happened to me, like don't do this. From talking from my own experience, and like really like I really enjoy helping people, and telling them like what I've learned. I think it's probably hard enough to hate on that, so I have
Yeah.
to know I haven't. I mean, look, there's a few snarky comments, but for the most part, no, I haven't gotten anything good.
How do you deal with those snarky comments, or is it just that overpowering feeling that, oh, I'm actually helping someone, so I don't really care about whoever that person is?
I'm more so like, well, if you're sending me a snarky comment, that says a lot more about you than me. And like
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, well, I'm kind of honored that you like took the time out of your day almost
Yeah.
to say that. So yeah, I definitely I just don't take it personally. I actually read this book, and it was like one of the rules, and it was like, just don't take anything personally, because it's more about them and not you. And people often project how they feel onto someone else, and I was like, that is true. Like,
Yeah.
people do. And if people are mean or have negative things to say, it does normally mean that they're not really happy in themselves. Like even when I look back to when I was younger and would have said stupid snarky things, like, I had a lot of growing up to do. But it's normally like when you're like just not that happy in yourself, and you just are in that kind of constant negative bitchy kind of mindset. But then when you are happy in yourself, you're like, oh, like why would I say anything mean? Or this person could be where I was a few years ago, so it's fine. Like,
Do you feel a pressure or like an expectation now that, I think it's 22,000 followers? Do you ever feel like, oh, I have to not deliver content, but like people are expecting something, and
yes,
like, yeah, do you feel that?
I do massively. And it's something that I don't like. I feel every day now this like a pressure, but it's self-inflicted, of course. But I'm like, shit, like I haven't posted, or I lost followers. I mean, I need to do this, I need to do that. So yeah, that is actually the one thing I do find hard. And sometimes I'm like, Amy, like stop. It's just Instagram. Like you don't have to
Yeah.
have this amazing content every day. Or I would just find myself being like, okay, what will I talk about next? Like, or like even when I moved up to Dublin now, it was quite hard, and I went through a bit of a lull where I was just so busy trying to settle in and stuff that I didn't have time to
Yeah.
film stuff or to come up with stuff. And I was like, oh my god, like what am I going to do? I'm not doing it. So yeah, I would find that hard. But it's more so because I'm like, well, I've like established this page and people who follow me know what I'm about, so you kind of want to keep it up. So yeah, that is the one thing I would find hard, is constantly feeling the need to be like, oh, I need to post, I need to put this up, I need to talk about this. That is quite, yeah.
Yeah. Do you take it personally then when people unfollow you? Because I really hate it. I'm like, oh, I know that's so stupid and immature, but I think it just shows that, like, I've nowhere near 20,000 followers. It just shows like you actually care. Like you actually care about the content.
I know, that's the thing. No, I'm like, sometimes if I drop followers, I'm like, I do get a bit upset because I'm like, hang on, like I'm putting all this work in, like give me feedback. Where are you going? Yeah, I do find it tough. But one thing I've learned from social media is like, before I kind of like took my page seriously or anything, I remember like the number 11 will actually sit with me till I die. I was on like 11,000 followers for so long, and I go up 0.3, 0.4, and it really started getting to me. And I actually became like, I was like becoming a bit obsessive with like checking and stuff and being like, why is it going up and down? And this went on for a few months, like where I was just stuck at this 11,000 and something. And then like once my page started to pick up, I mean, like I kind of learned that, okay, like you go through phases of growing and you go through phases of like plateauing or losing even, and that's just all part of the process. But see, I think like the reason we care is like, I feel like sometimes you see these people growing, like it's just, they don't even have to do anything and they'll go up like 1,000 or 2,000 people, and I think that's when it's like, hey, like how are they doing that? And like you're putting in this work and stuff, and that's, I think what's hard is that you feel like some people just don't have to do anything and they grow, whereas like when you're putting the work in and you're not getting the results, you're like, it's like, what's going on? So I think that's why you care sometimes, you know, when it's not growing. But as I said, like the one thing I've learned is that like when I'm going through those periods of like stagnation on social media, I'm like, this is happening, it's supposed to be happening for whatever reason, and I know that there's a jump or something in store.
Yeah. Do you find that anyone kind of copies your content? It's probably hard because you're talking about your own experience, but would you get that a bit where it's like they don't even have to tag you, but you just notice certain accounts or people, you're just like, you're literally just ripping off my idea or my photo or something?
Yeah, no, do you know what? I actually don't. Like, I can't say I've ever been like, oh, I did that. Like, again, I think, as you said, it's because I talk from personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be hard to literally copy me, because I'd just be like, well, that was my idea. So I can't say I do now, to be honest. But even if people message me and they're like, oh, how do I want to do what you're doing, like how do I start, then I'd be more than happy to, I literally get back to every single person who would like write to me and stuff, because I just think like, I would like to have known stuff maybe, or I know this would help someone.
Do you have your notifications turned on actually on social media?
Yeah.
Oh, you do? So your phone's just like blowing up all the time?
Yeah, or someone was like me before, like, does that not annoy you? But I don't, I suppose I'm not, yeah, I'm used to it, so I would just kind of click into it the odd time. I wouldn't be like constantly checking and then like obsessive over it, whereas then I'm like, okay, I'll go on Insta now and see what's happening on there. But yeah, no, I couldn't turn my notifications off. I'd be like, what if I miss something? What if something big happens and I miss it?
Talking about, you were saying you're a full-time athlete. You spoke about there working with brands and stuff. How difficult is it to be in Ireland? Like, I know I don't really know a lot about the whole Olympic funding. How difficult is it to be a full-time Irish athlete and be depending on brands and, ambassadors and kind of sponsorship? Just talk us through a little bit of that, because I think from my perspective, I know very little about it, and I think some of the listeners wouldn't know much about it either.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm actually very lucky. So like what I do now at the moment is I'm with an agency on social media. So I mean, that's kind of how I'm getting my income at the moment. But before I joined the agency, it was quite hard, whereas there's obviously just a lot more consistency there now. So that's where I would get my income from. And then I was just really lucky before that, like to have very supportive parents who kind of knew what I was doing and knew what I was about and where I wanted to go with this. So like they were very patient and very helpful. They still are very, very helpful to me. But I think like if I didn't have this gig on social media, I'd probably be subbing like for primary school teaching, and
Okay.
that would be really hard. It's great that like I love social media, and now I've luckily gotten an income from it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it is hard unless you're a professional athlete and have like a contract to make it or to sustain a running career, because unless you're really at the tip top level, you wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
get much money from running. So a lot of us are, you know, have other things going on, and that's how we get our income. So it is hard, but I think now I'm obviously in a great place that I have lifestyle and that I actually love doing what I am doing on social media. But it's hard, you know. There's like running, there's a lot of traveling involved, there's, you know, money for shoes, physio, all of that. um so yeah, it's tough, but I think if you love it enough, like you'll make sacrifices, you know. Like I literally didn't buy any clothes for a year, and I like, because I'd rather put money into something else, or you just have to pick and choose, you know.
Yeah, you have to be kind of smart about it because all the travel is obviously self-funded then.
Yeah, some of the camps that we go on would be subsidized, but like if
Okay.
I was just going over to England for a race, like yeah, I pay for everything.
Looking towards the future then, what's the plan? I know we were talking about you're going through a little bit of an injury at the moment. What's the plan with running? What's the plan with work? You're obviously continuing on with lifestyle sports. I know there's a big new partnership with Her Sport that you're also involved in, which is brilliant. Talk us through a little bit of what you're kind of hoping for maybe down the line.
Well, yeah, definitely. Like with social media, I would love to stick with that for the next few years. I think even though I've been doing it since 2020, I'm still learning a lot about it. And um, even just working with lifestyle sports now is amazing. And even going into all of that and like doing the shoots and like the clothes and stuff, like I love that. And it's really great. So I really hope that I can keep that up for a good few years.
Mm.
I would love to like eventually get into sports psychology. I do love sports psychology. I'm just fascinated by it. But that wouldn't be for a while. Like I think right now I want to focus on running. And then running wise, like my aim before the start of this season was to get my times right down so that next year I could get into like really high quality races. And like, yeah, unfortunately that has been postponed a little bit. I still think that if I can get into good races in July and August, that can happen. Like I wanted to work on both my 1500 and 800 meter times, but like unfortunately the way the season has panned out for me, I might just have to focus on 15s this year. I'd also love to make the European cross country relay team that's on in Dublin, hopefully in December. And then next year, like world champs are on, and you know, with the point system and stuff, I think I just need to get into the right races, get that consistency. And like obviously Olympics is the main aim, and I do genuinely think that if I could stay consistent, that in another 3 years I'd be more than capable to get there. So yeah, that would be, I mean, Olympics is still the goal, and everything up till then is just working towards that and trying to avoid the niggles, like, I suppose, which is really the hardest thing and the most frustrating thing. Um, so yeah.
So the Olympics, since what age was that? Because I get the sense like that's the dream, that's the ultimate goal. When did you kind of put it up on the wall and say, right, Olympics, I'm going?
So I suppose at the European Youth Olympics, which was essentially a mini one, you know,
Yeah,
um, it was then, and then I also went to the European Games in 2019,
yeah.
and that was, I'd say, as close to an Olympics now as you'd get. Like it was a replica of it, and I was like, I just, even you can at the UIOF that was in 2011. You in the Olympic Village, you collect badges from the other countries, like with the
Oh,
Olympic
that's
Games, which is
cool.
so cool. And like just doing all that, I was like, oh, I just like I need to go to the real thing. um yeah, and I guess just, I mean, for any runner I think who's still in it now, like that's in the back of your head, like, you know, the Olympics. And even now, I mean, I've just become so much more confident this year in being like, I can definitely make the next one, because I'm now seeing my friends make it. And you know, it's all of a sudden it was so far away, and now I'm like, no, that's a reality, like that can happen in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
suppose it's always been in the back of my head, but as the more I get older, the more I'm like more serious about it.
Mm-hmm. When sport is all said and done, you do eventually finish running, hopefully not for a long time. What do you want to be remembered for?
Like, it's funny because, when you see like older runners, you never that have retired, you're
Yeah.
never like, oh, like I remember the day they ran that time, or I remember they won this race. Like, you remember their character, and you remember, like, what they did, how they composed themselves, or like, did they help other people. So I suppose for me, I'm like, I want to be remembered by my character, and like, well, she had a lot of injuries, but she always bounced back. And even like through my social media, like, sharing my experience and stuff, because I think there aren't many runners who do share their experience, and I think it's kind of a cool thing to have. So I'd like to be remembered as someone who actually shared their whole running experience, and just, I suppose, made it more accessible to your everyday runner, and
Yeah.
not just to the elite runners. And yeah, just remembered as someone who dug deep and overcame the injuries and didn't just throw the towel in.
Yeah. So I'm interested to hear then, what is your definition of success? Is that purely focused on achievements, or is it just an inner kind of voice where you want to just, as you said, develop the character?
Yeah, it's definitely not just on achievements, because I think success could be something like getting through your first session after an injury. So I think for me, like, success is really just about like overcoming fear, because a lot of what we do is fear based, or like how we act is fear based. And to me, success is when you say, you know what, like, shove it, like I'm gonna do this, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna take control here. And a lot of success I've had, I could say I could have thrown in the towel. I could have just been like, well, you know what, I don't know, or just humming and hawing. Whereas, like, a successful person is someone who, goes through challenges and the ups and downs, and they still come back wanting more and actually doing more to get to where they want to be.
We're going to move on to the sideline seven. It's the same 7 questions at the end of every podcast. Question one: what is your favorite quote? And I'm going to be interested with this because you seem like a real good quote person.
I love a good quote. I swear, like, when I saw that
You've
question,
met
I
your
was
sister.
I just, some people don't like them, and I'm like, well, how can you not like them? Like, they get me through the day. Like, I am.
Same.
I literally have this book that, like, I read every morning. That's like quote central. But you know what? I was like, I could spend all day and night thinking about this, but I actually have a quote in my bio called "See the Good,"
Okay.
and I think that's my favorite quote, because that is something that has changed my whole perspective on life, seeing the good in things. So I'd have to go with "See the Good."
Love it. Best sporting event you've been to?
Definitely the European Games. So that was the one I was at in Belarus. It's only on. It's essentially a European Olympic Games. Like, there's
Yeah.
the Olympic Village. So the one I went to was in Belarus, and like, it was a packed stadium, like the opening ceremony, and they had like a load of previous Olympic champions, and like the stadiums were massive. We got to go and watch all the other sports, like boxing and stuff, and all the gear had the Olympic rings. And it was just so massive, and I suppose the closest thing that you would get to an Olympics.
Mm.
And I never would have gone to see Belarus, had I not gone to that competition. So it was a really cool experience.
I get the sense that there was like a different level of energy at the European Games compared to like a normal competition.
It was, and you know what? Because it was like a new event, so like I was in a relay. So even over there, it wasn't this. Obviously, yeah, you're under pressure, but it wasn't this crazy individual pressure that you would normally feel at a big international. So it made it even more enjoyable then, because it was like, this is just a great experience, and great to experience what like a real Olympics would be like.
Yeah, that's cool. Biggest setback or challenge so far in your career? And we've spoke about a lot of them.
Yeah, I think it was just the foot thing from 2011 to 2014. Like, I honestly do believe I would be at a different level, and would have, jumped more, like, if that didn't happen. Whereas I feel like I'm always kind of playing catch up from that
Yeah.
period of my running, and I did lose a lot of consistency that takes years and years to build back, and a lot of confidence that takes years to kind of build back up. So yeah, I definitely say that period, like the constant stress reactions in the navicular from 2011 to 2013.
Kind of on the flip side then, biggest achievement on or off the track?
On the track would definitely be, and I know I'm like literally still living in 2010, but at schools, like honestly, people are probably like, can you move past that? Like that's 11 years ago. But yeah, it was that year. I did the double in the intermediate schools, and I broke like a 20-plus-year-old record. And on schools like that, I don't actually know if anyone else has done it, but winning the double in all age groups, junior, inter, and senior, I don't think anyone else has done that. So I think that would be my biggest achievement on the track. And then off the track, when I was graduating from Mary I got the award for outstanding achievement, and that was like for anyone in the year, like they had to pick someone like from all sports or all backgrounds. So I was
Yeah.
like, I was chuffed like to get that. I was like, wow, this is really cool. Like they just really acknowledge the work that is goes into running and training and trying to balance everything, college life, college work, and running. So that was a really nice thing to get then off the track.
Yeah, that's lovely. Advice to your 18-year-old self?
Definitely learn a bit of patience, which my 27-year-old self is still trying to learn. I would say that things rarely go the way you think. They actually would go as far to say they never do. So like, stop trying to control things because you can't, and you just don't know what's around the corner. But I think patience would definitely be the biggest one. You just, when you're 18, you're not patient, and you don't care.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
patience.
Dream dinner guest and why?
This is so random, and like this was the first person that popped into my head. So there's this guy I follow on Instagram called Young Pueblo, and he's kind of like a motivational / inspirational speaker. But to say that I have like learned so much from his page on Instagram and how he thinks, and like every post he puts up, I'm just like, wow, that's so interesting. And like all the different perspective he comes from, I just feel like if I was at dinner with him, I would burn the ear off him. And I would just ask him so much, because he's so interesting, and the way he speaks about life and in general is just so interesting. So that would definitely be my dream dinner guest.
Okay, I'll have to check out his page. Is there any other
Yeah,
accounts
definitely.
that stand out for you apart from the Sideline Live, obviously?
Of course, my favorite
Yeah.
number one. Um, Actually, do you know Sinead Hegarty?
No, I don't.
So she's a blogger, and like again, she just completely changed the way I think, and actually like made me develop this like real interest in emotions and how our emotions play such a big part in life. And so obviously, what she would talk about mostly on her page is relationships, and also
Okay.
like talk about experience. And it was funny because I found her page when I was going through a breakup, that like she had also gone through quite a similar breakup. So like everything she said I could resonate, but she like just the way she speaks about things and her own experience, and like again really opened up my mind to like, hang on, like I act I act a certain way because of my past experience, and someone else acts a certain way because of their past experience. And like, just because I think a certain way and see things in a certain way doesn't mean that anyone else does. So I
Yeah.
guess that like it was like just a big like time of enlightenment for me, where I was like, wow, like this all makes sense. So yeah, and Sinead Hegarty would definitely be my one to go follow. I get so much inspiration from her.
Okay, I'll definitely be checking out the two, and I'll
Oh,
leave the
to do
link in
all
the
her
description for
highlights.
anyone.
I have watched
Yeah.
her highlights like so many times too. They're brilliant.
Okay, deadly. I'll definitely check her out. Last question: if your life was a book, what chapter would this be called?
I think definitely a work in progress. Like this part of my life is chaotic at the best of times. There's a lot going on, like moving to Dublin, and just kind of even getting used to social media, as in it's now definitely more of like a job, I would say, kind of, than like just posting for fun. And that obviously takes adapting to as well. So I think as well, like just with COVID, is there's been a lot of like realizations, and like, well, I need to do this to get to here. And I think I'm still only like scratching the surface of where I want to be. So I would say, and getting over little niggles here and there, which is again hard, and learning about myself and like the workload I can tolerate and that I can't. So I would say a work in progress right now.
Before I let you go, because you've been so generous with your time, who would you like to see or listen to on the podcast? And if you do suggest someone, I might need your help getting them on.
Do you know Niamh Talon, the creator
Her
of her?
sport, yeah.
Yeah. I just think that like what she's done in the last year or two, like she has created like a huge online community. Like, I mean, I'm pretty sure she's close to 30K now, and like just the work that goes into her page and the work in showcasing all the girls, all the Irish girls from all different sports. I just think it's brilliant, and I just think it would be so interesting to learn like how she actually got into it, and how it's come on, how it's progressed. It's just jumped leaps and bounds. So I think you should. She sprung to mind straight away. I was like, I would love to listen to Niamh on a podcast.
Brilliant. I'll
And
definitely get onto her.
I know her, so I can
Yeah,
put in a
there you
word.
go. Get the connection there. There you go.
Yeah.
Look, Amy, that was like inspirational. Thank you so much for your time. I just want to wish you the best of luck with everything, with running, off the track stuff, and just thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me on. That was a great chat.
A massive thank you to Amy for joining me today. I thoroughly enjoyed our chat and I hope you found some value from it. If you did, be sure to let me know over on social media at The Sideline Live. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and you did enjoy the episode, be sure to leave a rating and a review. If you're interested in starting up your own podcast, be sure to get in touch with the Primal Productions team over on Instagram at Primal Pro.